everybody likes it. In terms of driving experience, I'm really not enjoying this anymore. I think I'm going to have to change it. Welcome to another video about Preston Tucker, my PT panel cruiser. Yep, it was a 5-door car that I converted into a panel van. It's also slammed on air ride, and it looked pretty cool when you slam it to the ground at a car show. And the way that I drive the car is a little bit more kind of like my weekend toy, so I like to drive it a little bit spiritedly, and that doesn't really suit the air ride setup that I've got on the car at the moment. So I'm going to be changing the air ride for a custom lowered suspension setup. I've got some springs that have been made for me by KW Suspension under their ST brand, especially for this car. I've got new struts, new dampers for the rear, new springs for the rear of course. I've got all sorts of poly bushes and new bushes for the anti-roll bar and all the rest of it. So I'm going to be stripping everything underneath that car off it and doing a lot of refreshing and maybe some customization as well. First I've got to remove all of the air ride, strip out the interior because I want to redo that, and then I'm going to strip all of the suspension off, drop the rear axle and refurbish that with new bushes and maybe some powder coating. I've been crazy with colors on the underside of cars before, so this won't be the first time. Let's undo everything I've done already. If you ever jack up your car, don't just leave it on the jack. Use axle stands, use jack stands. They are much more secure and they won't go down. And don't just use 1 or 2, use as many as you've got. I've got 6 underneath that car. The floor is up. Well, the carpet is up, revealing the frame that I put down. Hey Brody dog! My dog has joined me in the van. Next step, let's get those wheels off. Move the top mounts. So that is the 2 lower strut bolts removed now. That releases the strut. You can see that's completely loose now. And that is the air strut removed. It's as simple as that. Looks like a normal suspension strut, except it has an airbag instead of a spring. Let's move on to the others. There you go. Next one is out. I'm going to remove the airbags from the rear of the car. So I'll begin with removing the lower bolts for the dampers, which will allow the trailing arms to drop down to their lowest position. That's how you can tell whether your dampers are finished or worn out or not, is if they spring back, which these don't. What I'm going to do is release the bolts for the drop link, and I'm going to remove the brake caliper. Drop link is released. That means that the anti-roll bar is released on this side. Now I'll just go and do the same on the other side. That is the fully suspended suspension now. My Watts link, so I'm not going to worry about replacing that, but I will have to release it from the underside of the van so I can drop the axle as far down as I can. Let's get those airbags off. There we go. Bada bing. And there you go. That is the right hand side airbag out. My idea is to remove this whole rear axle to get to the trailing arm bushes, but then also to get it treated, maybe sandblasted or something, to get rid of all of the surface rust and make it as good as new. I'm going to remove the center bolt here. 18 mil out. Alright, just do the other side. There we go. Right, so the axle is now free. No dampers, no Watts link holding it in place. So I've got it supported by these blocks of wood over here. So what I need to do now is actually remove these hub assemblies. Remove the brake caliper from the hub and also loosen up and free these little brackets that hold these various cables in place. These are actually quite nice and free. Happy days. There's another bolt over here for this forward bracket that holds the handbrake cable in place. So I'm going to need to release this handbrake cable from inside the hub, which means I'm going to need to take the whole hub assembly off. These two bolts over here are the two sliding pin bolts that hold the caliper to the carrier, and then this black wire here is for the ABS sensor. Push the clip back and free the wire. The ABS sensor is held in here by a 10mm nut. Now I don't want to disconnect this brake line because I have no need to bleed my brakes. So that is free, and that's the brake caliper. I'll just put that there for now. Okay, so we'll move to the other side quickly and then I'll come back here. I need to remove this brake disc, but of course the handbrake's going to be on, so I need to release the handbrake and then I'll be able to pop that off. So there's my handbrake lever, and to release as much of that cable as I can, I need to remove the center console, and then I can get to the handbrake mechanism and slacken it off a little bit more. There we go. Here you can see where the handbrake cables come in left and right. So I'm just going to give these a pull and then disconnect the cables, and I've got no tension on the handbrakes at the back. The handbrake cable released, I can work off the disc. I need to be able to get the handbrake cable out of this mechanism, so I'm going to have to take this whole assembly apart. I should just be able to slide the hub out, and I can. There you go. So that is the hub spindle. Now that is held in by those 4 bolts at the back there, but before I do that I need to take off the handbrake shoes.
A few moments later.
So I now have the handbrake cable free of the trailing arm. Now I can release the 4 bolts that hold that hub carrier in place. Right, so that is the hub carrier free. A little stub. And that is effectively the right hand side of the rear axle disassembled. So I'll just do the same on the other side. Now I can release these 4 bolts that hold on the trailing arm bracket on both sides of the car. And that will drop the axle to the ground. So with the axle off, I can now remove these brackets for the springs. On the underside of the car, this is the bracket that I'm removing. So I've removed those bolts and nuts up there. And then down here, we've got the spring perch, which is its own bracket. I've got the wheel arch liners out now. Wheel arch looks pretty good, except for there. Now, it's a good thing I clean this out fairly regularly, because if you don't, what happens is that the moisture and muck that gets trapped behind the wheel arch liner actually just rots away the sill. And so I've got some work to do over there to treat all of that surface rust. Thankfully it's not rotted through. And that's the fuel pipe. And that there is the rear towing eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that as well and clean that up, and also just treat the underbody. While you're in here, you might as well do it all. And that is the towing eye off. Yeah, the chassis rail is looking very good. Now these are all the brackets that I've removed from the underside of my panel cruiser. So once I've got these all cleaned up, I will then use some rust converter from Genelite, then treat all of the rust, and then I'm going to paint it with some black wax oil type paint to protect it. And of course I'm going to do the underside of the panel cruiser as well. Ta-da! I have decided to make my life a whole lot easier, and I've bought myself a little desktop sandblasting cabinet off eBay. 115 quid, which is a lot less than if I had to send all of those brackets off to someone to do it for me. Plus I can use this for the parts on the camper van and other vehicles. I've done these two pieces over here. That was the first one that I did, so it was a little bit hit and miss until I kind of figured out how the grit and that worked. But yeah, pretty good. So I've already given it a first coat of rust preventive. So now I have all of these ones here to do still. I'm slowly making progress on all of these brackets. So what I'm doing is sandblasting them in my little cabinet, then cleaning them up with some brake and parts cleaner, and then covering them with some rust converter. And then what I'll do to complete the process is cover those all with some Underseal. And this is the last of my brackets that I just need to treat after cleaning up. Then I moved on to using the needle scaler on the axle to remove all of the flaking surface rust. After I wire brushed down the axle to get all the surface rust off, I then proceeded to coat the axle with some Genolite rust converter. You can see now after a few minutes even how the surface of the axle is turning black. That rust converter is doing some or other chemical reaction with the rust and then neutralizing it. So I'll wait about another 10 minutes or so for it to be dry and then give it another coat. So I also need to flip it over and coat the other side. But so far so good, quite happy with that. And this is the underside of my car. Aside from being a little bit dirty, it is in great condition, and in fact that is the original rear back box, and the vehicle now is 23 years old. So now on to the underside of the car. While I wait for the axle to dry, I'm going to apply some rust remover, and the rust that I want to try and remove is up here on the underside of the van where those brackets fit. That's on the back left, and here is the back right. I've got my pink rust remover. I'll dust that down a little bit. Let's put a little bit of this stuff on. I am going to wax oil these cavities anyway. So while I've been waiting for that rust remover to do its thing, I've just been coating a light coat of rust converter over the top of the stuff that I put here before, and this is slowly going dark grey purple color. Okay, so it definitely took the rust off from inside there. It's definitely working, there's no two ways about it. You can definitely see on the left hand side where the surface rust staining wasn't nearly as bad as the right hand side. This is cleaned up pretty well. I reckon that this side would probably clean up with one more coat completely. I think the right hand side probably needs a few more coats to get it completely gone. So I'm going to use some salt remover from rust.co.uk. After I had thoroughly cleaned the underside of the car with the rust remover, I then took a wire brush and wire brushed the underside of the vehicle. Now that I have all four wheel wells desalinated and cleaned out, I can let this dry, and once it's dry I will give it a coat of rust preventive, rust converter, and then anti-stone chip. And for all those hard to reach areas underneath the van, including the sills and the pockets that these brackets fit into, as well as the little strengthening beams, I'm going to be using this wax oil spray. I'm going to spray this inside all of these cavities. Before I underseal this, I just want to break open any kind of bubbling so I can treat that with the rust converter. I've plugged all of the threaded parts of the body with this masking tape so that I don't get any spray in there, any anti-stone chip in there. So this is the area where the trailing arm bracket mounts to. So I want to tidy this up a little bit with the wire brush before I treat it. And this is the anti-stone chip that I'm going to use on the underside of the panel cruiser. It's by Overhaul. I suspect it's very much like Black Raptor. I've got the Raptor gun to apply it as well. Now, unlike the Raptor, I don't think that this uses a hardener, but this is the Gravitex Plus HS. I've just double checked. I do not need to use a hardener with this, which is fab. Just hook this up to the gun and spray away. That is it done. But at least the underside and the rear arches, both sides, you can see nicely coated. This Gravitex stuff goes on really easily. It leaves a texture, definitely not quite as textured as what you might get with Raptor, but I'm quite happy with that. Now I'm just going to let it all dry. So that is everything done now, except for a few bits underneath the car near the front where the axle stands are. Time to paint my bits and pieces. So I've made this little kind of makeshift paint booth outside here so I can minimize the amount of overspray that I get on the garage floor or ceilings or walls and PT, panel cruiser and everything else. So I'm going to lay out all of the parts on this cardboard and then spray each side together with the Gravitex. Well, I've got to say I'm pretty happy with that. That was super easy. I don't think I need to do another coat. Just did a perfect job the first time. So I'm now in the position where I can start reassembling the rear axle. The first thing that I need to do before I do anything else is fit the new trailing arm bushes to the rear axle. I'm going to try and use the bearing puller to push this in. I don't even know if this is going to work. No flipping way. There we go. So this bearing puller has come to my rescue, because the proper tool that's supposed to do the job just doesn't. Now with the bush in place, I can fit the bracket which goes over the top. Then I just proceeded to bolt the brackets to the underside of the car and then the damper brackets to the inside of the wheel wells. That is both sides done now. The brackets that hold the dampers and the bump stop and then the spring perches are fitted underneath. So after I had refitted the axle to the underside of the body, what I've decided to do is measure to the front portion of the sill, which will be static on both sides. So that means my axle is square. So with the axle square, I can now torque up these bolts that hold the front of the trailing arms to the chassis. With the axle secured, I could then proceed to refit all of the hub components. With the dust cover fitted, I could then proceed to fit the hub back on the spindle and tighten it up with the big nut. I have some brand new custom made springs from ST Suspension, which is otherwise known as KW in Germany. In addition to that, I'll be using some Energy Suspension spring cushions on both the front and the rear. Get rid of all of those vibrations that travel through the chassis, especially on our shocking potholed roads. Nice and yellow. Rear springs first. Let's do it. So that's the lower one. Pop that in there. Okay, lift the jack please. With the springs in place, I could then go ahead and fit the new dampers, first the top bolt, then the lower bolt. I can now fit the Watts link. There we go. So that is all the main components done. Now it's just the annoying handbrake pads to sort out, and then I can fit the discs back on, and then the brakes, and that is the axle done and dusted. Now what you can barely see here is the rear anti-roll bar of my panel cruiser, and it has a little bit of flaking paint on it. And seeing as though I have refurbished the axle, before I refit this, I want to give this a tidy up as well. After fitting the rear anti-roll bar to the axle, I then proceeded to fit the drop links to the body and to the anti-roll bar. And that is my suspension and axle refresh on my panel cruiser, all done and dusted. I'm really looking forward to refitting the wheels, dropping it down and taking it for a drive for the first time with that new suspension and checking out how different it is. Don't forget to smash that thumbs up button and subscribe to follow, because there's lots to come on this little van build. I'm going to be redoing the interior. I have some great ideas, maybe a combination of custom van and micro camper. I'm really looking forward to it. So thanks for watching. Next time you see this little van, it'll be on the road. Happy days.